I'm Megan Skidmore, and welcome to the Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. I'm a woman, daughter, sister, spouse, mother, life coach, and person of faith on a mission to normalize asking questions and allowing doubts on a faith journey and all aspects of life. Join me as I bring this traditionally taboo topic out of the shadows of shame and into the light. I firmly believe we normalize through more talking and engaging in discussion. More talking peels back, exposes, and erases the layers of shame associated with asking questions and allowing doubts. When we are more authentic about our journey, we are more powerful because shame has no power in the face of authenticity. First Friday's free coaching, a confidential group to bring all the questions, vent frustrations, share fears, express doubts. Navigating a new and uncertain reality is hard enough. Let's remove the worry of judgment from others. In this group, I will help you help yourself so that you can be there for your child, family, loved ones, and for you too. Click the link in the show notes to sign up. You must complete the agreement. Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. So glad you're here. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. I have a longtime friend, virtual anyway, Michelle Peper with me. We met 3 years ago on Instagram, I think, Michelle. Yeah?
Yes, we did.
Going through this evolution, this pivot in our faith journey that, I don't know about you, I didn't see it coming necessarily. Has presented lots of interesting scenarios along the way. And so I'm always grateful to get to have these conversations and share with one another where we're at, how we're navigating, how we're doing, and so on. So thank you.
Too. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. I always like to get started with turning the floor over to you. Just introduce us to yourselves. Introduce yourself. Sorry. To us. Just share about your background, your family, all of those things.
Okay. Well, I was born in Southern Idaho back in the olden days. I'm 59 years old now. So back in 1965 to two active LDS parents. I grew up in a very loving home, good family, an older sister and a younger brother. Couldn't have asked for a better family. Just great. My family's history, both sides of the family go back to the beginning of the church, 6 generations or more. Joined overseas, lived in Nauvoo, crossed the plains, did the polygamy, settled Utah, all of it. So steeped in LDS, ancestry in my family. So that's interesting, as I journey through my faith at this point in my life. Let me think. My dad was a biology teacher. My mom started out as a stay-at-home mom, but teachers in Idaho aren't paid well. My dad also worked as a forest ranger in the summer. He taught piano lessons year-round, or at least school year-round. He's a fabulous tenor, an organist, and so music was kind of my thing as well. I was never athletic, and I loved singing. I played the cello. I sang in choirs. That was always my love growing up, and still do love it. I went to LDS Business College, met my husband, who was at the University of Utah. We were in the same student ward. He was investigating the church when he got to college, and he got baptized while he was in that ward, and we started dating the following summer and got married, within a year or so of dating. And we have 3 amazing children. Our son, who is 32 and has a lovely wife and 2 darling kids. Our daughter, who is 30 and has a wonderful husband and a darling dog. And our 19-year-old daughter, who is currently a student at the University of Utah. And that's basically us.
You have a lovely family heritage there.
We do.
You go way back.
way. I'm not big into family history. I don't do a lot of that, but some of my relatives have bound books together, and there's wonderful stories. But I was curious about the polygamy, so I got on Ancestry app and was looking back, and yeah, definitely
Yeah.
several of my greats have several wives and many children, and it was just very interesting.
I go back on one side of my family quite a ways.
Yeah.
On the other side, it's a little bit later pioneers, I guess we could say.
Yes.
Well, you know, what strikes me, Michelle, as you were sharing that is as much as those who came before you were trailblazers in their own way, you are a trailblazer in the here and the now in your own way. So I'm really excited for you to share more of your journey with those who are listening, because this is not easy and it takes it up not just a notch, probably 10 or 20 notches to get behind a microphone and share it in a more public way.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate that, because as I was telling you about my family heritage, I started to feel a little like panicked inside, like, wow, I'm breaking the chain. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I have cousins, and I'm sure there are people in my lines who have left, but it just sort of feels, like suddenly I was feeling a little guilty. I'm the weak link, so to say.
This is a complicated space for sure. And there's lots of
Yeah,
ways that we can look at it. And of course, yeah, our mind tells us one thing, our heart feels
right,
another. And
right.
I know I don't have to tell you that we get to define our journey and get to carve out that space, but that is in no way to diminish what I know are real and true and deep feelings that come up. And I just honor that and thank you for being real about that.
And
And I
and
think,
thank you for saying that, because oftentimes when people leave the church, they're talked as if they're lazy and just selfish, or
yeah,
but unless you've gone through it, you do not understand the
yeah,
difficulty and the pain and the struggle of it.
yeah, it's not something a person wakes up one day and just makes a decision about, like putting on what pair of jeans you're going to wear for the day or something. It's just not that, it just doesn't even touch it. So before we get to that, I wanted to talk a little about, one of the reasons I created this podcast is because I was sent on this major pivot, almost a tailspin, really, not a tailspin. I don't know if that's the right word, a headspin. when I
Spinning one way or another.
when I learned that, our child identified as queer, and just mostly because of trying to align that with the beliefs that I had been raised with and that go back for generations as well. And I finally figured out how much shame and how much, just negative feelings were coming up with for me as I was having these questions, or even just trying to consider an alternative point of view,
Right.
right? Allow those doubts to come in. And so I am all about normalizing faith journeys, that they're just like there are, okay, twins might, genetically look alike, but just like there are no two beings totally alike, our journeys are as unique as we are. I really believe that.
I
I do.
agree.
I truly believe that. And so I just want to contribute to this space that your journey is valid, my journey is valid, and so is our neighbors and your family members. I get it that it's idealistic to think that folks are going to be open to that, or maybe even, receptive to that idea. But at the very minimum, my hope is that we can at least honor one another's free agency, our own
That's beautiful.
free will to just navigate as we feel to our core that this is what we're to do. So I, keeping our minds and our hearts open to lean into uncertainty, that takes practice. I think it's a skill. And it doesn't mean that we're less faithful or that we're not a quote unquote true believer,
Mhm.
right? It doesn't mean any of that unless somebody chooses to believe it or doesn't realize that they're actually, leaning into that. Can you share with us, do you remember How was that part how was navigating that part for you when questions and doubts come up? You also have a queer child.
Yes, yes.
And so I think that was part of it. But yeah, whatever you want to
Yeah,
share.
and that's not when my questions started coming up. I
Okay.
started this journey before, so that in a way it's been that was easy, for me because I was already on the journey. But I spent most of my life just tamping down any questions. Like I would never ever look into polygamy. I didn't want to know how it got started. I didn't want to know because I knew it might shake me. And I didn't like questioning my faith was just you don't do it. You don't do it.
Right.
So I spent most of my life just never questioning my faith. And also, and I just spend most of my life trying to avoid discomfort. I want life to be easy. And so I would avoid conflict with people too. Just, not argue, just kind of people please, whatever, as long as, if whatever I can do to make peace around here and make sure everything's fine and everyone's happy. So I almost feel like those go hand in hand a little bit. If we avoid conflict, we avoid uncertainty in the relationships. If we avoid questions, we avoid uncertainty in our faith. All that stuff. It's just trying to just status quo, status quo, status quo. That's how I lived a lot of my life. So I think, and maybe I'm getting off from the question here, but I did start to allow questioning to come in around the time of like Black Lives Matter, 2015, 2016. I can't really remember when that was, 2017, maybe 2019. I don't recall. Trump presidency, all of that. I started noticing it was kind of more my politics than my religion that I started questioning first. It seems safe to question your politics sometimes. You're not going to make God angry, so that's okay. So I think that's where I allowed the questioning
Okay.
to
Politics
begin.
seemed a little more, quote, safe than
Yes.
questioning your religion. Okay.
Right. So
Fair.
so I think that was kind of the first chink. And I'm going to back it up a little bit. And my husband and I had gone through a little bit of difficulty in our relationship prior to that. And I had to deal with some real conflict and some real difficulties. Suddenly I couldn't smooth everything over, and hard conversations had to be
Mhm.
had. And it was really difficult. But I think because of that, I saw some real benefit. Like suddenly I'm like, wait a minute, I can do hard things and survive and
Mhm.
even grow and maybe even flourish.
Mhm.
So, as hard as that was, having to face things that I always swept under the rug, it was a real growth opportunity, and I grew from that. We grew from that as a couple, and so I think that helped me start questioning other things and going, wait a minute, being uncomfortable isn't all that bad, and actually it's kind of good.
Yeah.
So I started questioning my politics and what was going on in politics, and particularly during Black Lives Matter. There were on social media, I had friends who were very, very strong Christians and preached, on their platforms about love and God and this, and they were just saying really terrible things about. I remember when Colin Kaepernick took a knee,
Yeah.
um, and the vitriol coming from my religious Christian friends just shocked me. And that's kind of when I started questioning, like, wait a minute,
Mhm.
why would people who say they love Jesus and love each other, not try to seek understanding of what this man was trying to accomplish? And I really, really looked into what Colin Kaepernick did
Yeah.
and what he had to say. And my heart just went out to him. And I just suddenly started questioning, why are people, good people, saying ugly things?
Yeah.
So
Sounds
that kind of broke it open.
it sounds like you were experiencing a major paradigm shift,
Absolutely.
and it was something you couldn't look away from or unsee.
Yeah, once you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
No.
And I really got on fire about trying to educate myself and allow others to educate me on the Black experience,
Hmm.
because so many white Christian friends that I knew were telling me that racism didn't exist, and I could see it all over the place. And so I just sought understanding. And the more you get proximity to someone whose life is different than yours, the more it breaks your heart open, and the more compassionate you become, and the more empathetic you become, and the more loving you become. And then you're like, wow, I have been so closed off and so, you know, kind of in a bubble. I didn't even know this is how it was.
That is so true. I love that. Proximity just kind of cultivates compassion.
Mhm.
That's so true. And what I'm hearing from you is even though it was, I don't know, brought up fear for you, you realized it was just an emotion that you were going to feel. Like I heard you when you're like questioning my faith, you just don't do it. Spent most of my life never questioning my faith. I think, steer clear of that uncertainty.
Well, because there's no need to be uncertain. We have all the answers. In the
Right.
LDS faith, we have all the answers. And I've spent so many years saying how grateful I was to know where I came from, why I am here, and where I am going. Just, life couldn't be easier. Again, like no
Yeah.
uncertainty. I loved it, loved it.
It's much easier to go through life, or I should say, let's say it this way, it takes a lot less energy to go through life with that type of viewpoint. What I'm really struck by here is you had to actively give yourself permission to to accept what you were seeing, to really ingest,
Absolutely.
to internalize it, and not ignore what your inner wisdom was telling you. Tell us about that process because I think we tend to push up against that. We don't
Right.
always give ourselves permission to listen to our inner voice.
Yeah. And that's an interesting thing that you say, because as I pondered that, there was a time, again, right around the time that maybe my husband and I were going through some difficulties. And I I have always, I mean, clear back to at least high school anyway, um, in connection with my inner voice. And I always just, that to me, that's the Holy Ghost. I had a very close relationship with the Holy Ghost. And I
Yeah.
really, in my mind, it was Jesus, Jesus speaking to me through the Holy Ghost. So I felt very connected. And and I wouldn't always listen, I would ignore it, but I remember very distinctly getting promptings, um, to to stop wasting time and start becoming. The voice was basically telling me I needed to become more introspective, because
Hmm.
I was ignoring myself. I
Wow.
would be busy, and I would this and I would that. And I kept feeling this prompting to be introspective. And I was like, I did not want to do that. So I ignored it for a very long time.
Okay, I'm going to pause you right there.
Mhm.
Why do you think you didn't want to?
Because it would be uncomfortable.
Okay.
And I knew it would be uncomfortable. And I do not like to be
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Which means what? When we're uncomfortable.
Um, we might have to change.
Okay.
And then that's not easy.
Yeah.
And when you change, how does that impact your relationships? How does that impact the rest of your life? And maybe it's going to be too hard. Like whatever I'm supposed to change to might require more effort and more work, and like, I'm busy enough. I got all these callings. I've got kids. I've got a job. We run a business. I don't have time to be introspective and change. I got stuff to do.
Yeah, that motivational triad, right? You're
Mhm.
trying to retain that energy, but also I think it's more than that, right? You were truly trying to maintain a
Avoid.
sense of safety. Sorry.
I was avoiding.
That too, which also I think lends to feel, trying to feel safe in those
Yes.
familial
Hmm.
relationships, community relationships, which is very
Hmm.
real
Yes.
and
Yes.
cannot be understated. Yeah.
We live in a very small rural community, very conservative. Our ward is our people, you
Mhm.
know. The thought of not, I already didn't, I'm already a little different. I've always never been like super orthodox, intense, pretty laid back Mormon. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't feel like every single thing a prophet said was, a commandment. And, we were pretty nuanced. So that was even already kind of hard to fit in here because everyone was so orthodox. So the thought of not fitting in any more than I already, didn't was just like,
I feel
scary.
that. I feel that,
Scary.
Michelle.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for being so real about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's how it was. That's how it is.
So on that note, if we can shift a little bit, let's talk about what that has been like to navigate this journey, being part of a faith community, one where your roots grow are very deep in that community. And you did experience that resistance, that feeling, not feeling safe if you're to follow that
Right.
or become more introspective as you felt the Holy Ghost telling you to do so. Right.
Right.
What what was it like when you were thinking about acknowledging all of this in a more public way, in your faith community, whether that's actually at church on Sunday, maybe, or in other ways that your paths cross, midweek or whatever, and maybe you really never did. Maybe the safety or comfort level wasn't quite there. Just can you share a
Oh,
little bit about what
yeah.
that was like?
Yes. And I'm happy to. And my husband was on the journey at the same time I was.
Okay.
So, um, and he's a little more willing to rock the boat. He's got a little, I don't know, he's just not afraid of that kind of stuff. But so we've lived in this community for 20 years.
Hmm.
Um, and at the time that we were starting to experience, I don't know, political questions, he was the
Hmm.
bishop.
Okay.
And then uh, at the as soon as he was released after 5 years, I was made the Relief Society president.
Okay.
So we were kind of going through this as publicly facing the war, like in higher up callings, right? And after I was made Relief Society president, he was put in the stake presidency as the executive secretary. So we were kind of struggling with or changing, I guess you could say, while we were kind of really engaged and involved. Very
Right.
involved. We've been very involved from the get-go here. And but I could see it, I could see it happening in real time on Facebook, where people were posting, the politics back then were really hot and heavy, and there was a lot of anti-Black Lives Matter and anti this and pro-Trump that and anti-Trump that and we were quite engaged in the Black Lives Matter, standing up for the
Yeah.
Black community at the time and trying to educate ourselves. So we were publicly sharing our support, and that was very challenging for ward members, for their bishop and or their Relief Society president to say those things. But the fallout, people were still our friends, we were still engaged. This is our social group. So we were able to politically have our our place, and it didn't disrupt our lives too terribly much. So that was fine. But when I was released as Relief Society president, I was called to be a seminary teacher. And that's kind of when things got really tricky for me. When I was given that calling, I received a very strong prompting to become an ally for LGBTQ. And I'm like, what? Like, well, okay. And maybe it was just the next step from Black Lives Matter, like educating myself more on more of marginalized people. And so it wasn't a challenge for me. I like, okay, because I like I told you, I've always felt very connected with the Holy Ghost. And when I received that prompting, it felt important and it felt like it went with the calling. And I thought, well, that must be, I'm going to have, some queer kids or a queer kid in my class, and I've got to be a safe space. So I dove in 100%. Richard Osler, his book and his podcast, and Ben and Charlie's podcast, really just I ate it up.
Yeah, just a sponge, just absorb.
Just a sponge. And I would listen to it on my way to seminary in the mornings, and I'd be crying, just bawling with some of these stories. So I was a sponge, and I was like, and I think I had probably a couple queer kids in my class, plus I know one kid whose sister was. So it felt very, I don't know, just like it was meant to be. Right?
So for the benefit of those who are listening that are not of the LDS faith background, I like to just kind of give a little definition for these various forms of volunteering that you're talking about. The seminary teacher role that you played is pretty significant. It requires a daily commitment of getting up very early in the morning and teaching a religious class.
Right.
To
high school students,
to the youth. And so you were placed in a very, prominent space. What's the word I'm looking for? You were placed in a spot where you could really watch out and care for those queer students. So that was significant that you felt that prompting, that you felt that whispering. And then the previous two callings you mentioned, your husband being bishop, that's kind of like similar to being a pastor over the congregation. And then you were president over the
women's organization, yes.
Group or of your congregation. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So those were all time intensive and people intensive. And the seminary teacher calling, yes, I had to get up at 5 every morning. And I had 9th grade through 12th grade students. Basically, the 2 wards that are in our community, they were all basically in my class.
So can you share with us, what did that look like for you, knowing that your inner voice, the Holy Ghost, had shared to be an ally to queer students, queer folks? What was that like then, being a teacher, knowing that some of the doctrine and policy was not friendly toward that group?
Yeah, it gave me great confidence that the church and their stance was wrong. and because of my Black Lives Matter education, and I'd read the Race and the Priesthood gospel topics essay that the church had put out, I also knew that, they had banned Black people from the priesthood and the temple for decades and decades until 1978. And to me, that, and basically the church says, it originally they had blamed that's what God wanted. But in the gospel topics essay, they were like, we don't really know why, So it just solidified to me that these prophets and apostles make mistakes, and that this was a mistake. Their anti-LGBTQ stance was a mistake. So it just gave me confidence to feel strongly about loving and supporting and accepting without question. I just didn't question it, because God told me, the Spirit told me, the Holy Ghost, whoever, at the time it was the Holy Ghost, told me to love them.
And so how did that, if it did, influence your teaching with the students?
Well, it absolutely did.
Okay.
I never ever once uttered the words marriage is between a man and a woman. If I think there was one lesson where I felt like I couldn't get around it because it basically was the whole lesson, but I was careful to say the church's current stance is, kind of
Mhm.
left it feeling like, that could change. I didn't really say that, but I redacted. I redacted a lot of things because I noticed in the lesson manual they made a lot of lessons about marriage is between a man and a woman that didn't even apply to the scriptures that we were studying. But somehow they found ways to get that in there, and
Mhm.
I just redacted. And by my third year, like I was redacting so much, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I feel like a fraud because I'm not, I can't say what I really want to say because I would have, parents with pitchforks probably at my door, but I'm not saying what the church is expecting me to say. I'm really taking stuff out of the lessons now because I'm not comfortable
Yeah.
telling these kids some of these things.
Right.
And so I didn't teach after the third year, which I had planned on. That's the year my daughter graduated anyway. So it all worked out. By that third year, I was like, whoo, I cannot do this anymore.
Mhm.
Thank goodness I don't feel like I need to do this anymore.
Mhm.
So
What I'm hearing is at that point, it was just feeling very out of alignment for you.
very, very. And
And
there
you
were
could
a lot of
feel
little
it.
epiphanies that I had as a seminary teacher about other things I would never. The year that we taught church history, we were required to teach from the gospel topics essays. So I had to read things that, they wanted us to basically inoculate the kids from all the church history that they were hearing on the internet that the church had never taught us. So
Mhm.
they wrote the gospel topic essays basically to share some of that so that the kids could go to a church resource and see, oh, there were 5 different versions of the first vision. I'd heard that, but now the church is telling me that. But the church would try to do it in a faith promoting way, right?
Um,
Um, but I had to read all of these essays, and as a 57 at the time, 56-year-old woman who'd been taught something completely different my entire life, I started to get a little angry and feel a little betrayed and lied to. And so I was a little too old for the inoculation, I guess. The way I would put that.
so here's what I'm seeing, if I can kind of start from the beginning of our interview till now. You were raised in the LDS faith. You go back generations upon generations. You kind of checked all the boxes, we could say. You did what you were taught and what you thought was the right thing to do. And then in your 50s, maybe a little bit
Right.
before your 40s,
50s, well, 50s.
your eyes started to open to some things that maybe you hadn't quite seen before, and you hadn't, for whatever reason. Who knows why it happens when it does. And this was a real experience for you. You didn't make it
Yes.
up. You experienced the emotions that you experienced, the discomfort, the fear, the what ifs, and how do I move forward, and how do I say this out loud. And this is this is what I mean about faith journeys, right? This is your journey, and you are defining it, and it's in a partnership though with the divine.
Right.
I can sense that from you.
Well, and let me tell you this,
And
Megan,
that's
because this is
beautiful.
it is, and this is where why I can never probably deny some type of divine or deity or something bigger than me, because the middle of my third year teaching seminary, my daughter who was in my class, I had her all 3 years, and this was her senior year. She was hanging around after class where usually, I'm cleaning up and everyone's gone. And I'm like, well, she's in my way. I'm kind of tripping over her. I'm like, what's going on?
Mhm.
She said, I need to talk to you. I said, okay. And she said, I think I'm gay. And that was like suddenly it was like it all made sense. Like, oh, maybe I was prompted not just to be a safe space for the kids in my class, but for my daughter,
Mhm.
and I was so prepared and so in love with the LGBTQ community that, there was really no beats skipped. I just kind of looked at her and I'm not sure I said the right thing, but I said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Well, I think so." And I said, and I didn't want to say anything wrong, I just said, "That's fine. That's fine. That's great. I'm glad let's, do you want to talk about it?" She said, "Well, I have to get to school." And we just hugged and we both kind of cried. And that was the end of the sadness. When we
Mhm.
talked later, we were just matter of fact, and this is what it is. And I told her dad, and he loved it. We watched a movie with a queer couple in it that weekend as a family, just having a great time. And it was just turned out to be the most beautiful experience. But it would not have been that way had I not
Yeah.
had that prompting. I would have
What a-
been, I would have said all the wrong things and done all the wrong things, which is fine. That happens too. And we
Mhm.
would have
It
survived.
does. And I mean, what a blessing for your daughter.
Yeah.
And yes, at the same time, you would have been able to navigate
Yeah.
regardless. But clearly, you're learning and leaning into cultivating safe spaces and following your inner intuition, as well as, learning to step into brave spaces really helped prepare you for that moment with your daughter.
Yeah. Well, she
Uh,
was so brave. But she
yeah,
knew, she
she
knew
was
she could be
watching you.
brave. Right. Right.
Yeah, I believe that. I do.
Yeah.
So, how has your faith journey been different than think about little Michelle, decades ago? How has it been different than perhaps what you expected?
Well, my whole life journey, it's like funny, I say this to a lot of friends, like when you're 15 or 20 years old, can you see your life, and you imagine your future? Does it look anything like what you imagined? And most people say no, not necessarily their
Mm.
faith, but just their life,
That is true.
But honestly, and that's fine, but honestly, I never, ever expected that my faith would not stay the same.
Mhm.
So that is a real surprise to me. And I could feel it happening. And I was like, oh man, I'm not sure I can handle this. This is not, this is so out of left field, but I had to go with, my integrity and follow that through, but absolutely did not see myself ever leaving the LDS faith ever.
I appreciate that. I think it's so important to acknowledge how sacred these journeys are and how unique and individual and personal. And it's not because you lost your way, it's because that's what you felt, the space that you felt called and drawn to go to and to be.
Very true. That spirit that I've always listened to was a spirit that guided me in, through, along the way, and has never left me, and is still there. And which is why, even though it's been difficult, it hasn't been a question. You know what I mean? I've always felt like I've been listening to that voice for 40
Mhm.
some years. I'm not going to doubt it now.
You you recognized it. You had created a relationship. And so you
Yes.
knew when it was speaking to you. And, for our listeners, if I could just invite you to, whenever loved ones or those that are close to you, you see them on a journey that looks differently from yours, I invite you to consider the uniqueness and the divinity that is there in their journey, and that is how an all-loving God is communicating with them, helping them grow, providing them with what is needful and for them in this mortal journey, just like an all-loving God is doing the same for you. I'm so passionate about let's not just blur these lines between us and them. Let's just erase them. Can we meet on the bridge? Let's meet and connect and just love one another and not make one path, evil and the other good. There's just I'm I'm a parent of a child who identifies as transgender, and I've just learned how little that there's no black and white when it
That's
comes
just so
to life.
beautifully said, Megan.
There's just that's just humanity trying to stay safe and stay in the certain zone and stay away from the discomfort. And just like you learned in your youth, well, a few years ago, which is still very young. I just mean
Yes, it is, Megan. It's very
not in
young.
primary days, you realized, okay, I felt uncomfortable. That wasn't great. It wasn't, fun, but it was doable.
And there was real fruit from it. Not
Yeah.
just not just that it was uncomfortable and hard, but
Yeah.
I lived, but I actually benefited.
Yeah. That's that's a really great point too. So, a final question for you that I like to ask all of my guests, and that is, what does it mean to you to live beyond the shadow of doubt?
That is an interesting question, because the shadow of doubt is where living in the shadow of doubt is where there's fear, I think, and and that's kind of, I think, when you let doubt cause fear, that you want to box yourself in and kind of box your life in so that you can avoid that fear. When you step outside of that shadow and you embrace the doubt and the uncertainty, it literally is like being freed from a cage
Wow.
to me. It's the most freeing thing I have ever experienced in my life. And I did not know that I wasn't free.
Hmm.
I felt incredibly like, just following the rules that I was given was what gave me freedom.
Hmm.
But I wasn't free to really love or feel empathy or have compassion or mercy for a lot of the thems,
Yeah.
only for the us's.
Yeah.
And I served and gave and offered up my time, but pretty much only to the us's. I ministered to the us's.
That's
And
really interesting perspective. That is
yeah,
actually, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I hear it.
yeah. But when you get out, suddenly you allow yourself to love the thems, and suddenly they aren't them anymore. They're we.
Hmm.
Um, and I find myself drawn towards people who I would have used to feel afraid of or judgmental of. I just was sitting somewhere. I'm trying to think where it was, maybe yesterday or the day before. I think it was just yesterday. This group came into a fast food restaurant that I was eating at with my husband, and they looked, from my church lady perspective, a little rough. Some tattoos and some wild hair and some piercings, and I, instead of feeling afraid or judgment, I just loved them and I wanted to go talk to them. I really just felt this, I wanted to just go sit at the table with them and get their story. And that is not something I used to be, I used to just like go, oh man, why do people, you know, get all those tattoos or whatever I would have said at the time.
Right.
I just felt like, oh man, I bet they have such an interesting story. I would love to hear, that what they're doing, what they're up to, what their life is like. I don't know. I just find myself noticing people that I used to try to avoid and wondering about them and wanting to know them and wishing I could be their friends. I don't know how to make those kinds of friends. I'm probably too, they probably look at me and go, oh, she looks too
There's
uptight. We're not. here. But
There's so much beauty in that. There's
I
so much
know
beauty
it
in
makes me
seeing
happy.
the divinity in everyone around us. I love your thoughts on the we, focusing on the we, turning that us versus them to we. That's a beautiful, segue to wrapping this lovely episode up. Um, that's I think where the divine is.
Yes,
Turning the us versus them into let's evolve into the we that we already are. That's already existent. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. I
Love it.
That's where I find the divine.
Yeah. Well, I like to ask a few for fun questions that I don't tell you about. Just looking for
Uh-oh.
one or two word answers to get to
Okay.
know you a little bit better. Tell us your favorite book.
Oh, favorite is hard, but impactful. I'm going to give you two.
Impactful.
One was Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram Kendi.
Okay.
Incredibly, that was at the beginning of the Black Lives Matter journey that I went on. And it's just like a 600-page book, but powerful,
Okay.
meaningful, impactful for me. And then I just finished Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime. And it's about his life growing up in apartheid South Africa. Fascinating, interesting, much shorter, a lot easier of a read. He's an amazing storyteller. So many great little quotes that just some really good stuff.
Awesome.
And I'm saying that one because it's fresh, but it was also impactful and very enjoyable.
Well, great. Thank you for those recommendations.
Sure.
Um, who are you an introvert or an extrovert, would you say?
I've always been an extrovert, but as I've gotten older, I'm super happy to be an
Look inward.
introvert. And my husband was always an introvert, and now he drags me around and makes me socialize with people. So and I always enjoy it once he gets me there. So I still think I'm an extrovert. I'm just a lazy extrovert.
Funny what age does to us, right? Are you a night
Yes,
owl or a morning lark?
morning. I'd
And
love to be a night owl, but I can't do it. I'm just so tired, and I wake up at 5 or 6, and I've learned to lay in bed as long as I can now and enjoy it. But I'm awake. I wake up early.
I would love to be a morning lark. Who was your favorite artist?
Type of artist: music, paint.
You pick.
Oh boy. Wow, there's so many artists. I gravitate to music
Hmm.
probably, and that's really hard to have a favorite. And this is going to be so like just outside the box, but I love the Foo Fighters and Dave Grohl. Those are like he's just when I need some oomph.
I love that.
Um, it
That's
just
great.
I just think that, yeah, some great stuff.
Awesome. Do you do still or carbonated water, or are you a diet soda fan?
Oh gosh, uh, I'm a diet soda fan. I but I love all the
Good
waters
company.
as well.
You're
But
in good company.
I'm in, yeah, diet soda is my
And do you
jam.
have a celebrity crush?
I don't know. I think I'm too old for that now, but it's funny, right? When you said that, my mind went somewhere, so I must. But
Okay,
I went straight to Colin Farrell.
that's awesome.
So apparently I do. I didn't know,
Apparently
but
you
yeah.
do. That's great awareness. I love
Yeah.
that. And then finally, the furthest place you have traveled.
Wow. Well, I don't know in mileage, but I've been to Budapest, Hungary,
Ooh,
um, Florence and Rome and London. I think those all those probably Budapest might be the furthest.
fun, fun places. I
Yeah.
haven't been to Budapest, but yeah. Clearly, I don't know
Yeah.
how to say it because you said it differently than I.
Oh, well, they say Pest, Budapest over there, and we
That's
worked with some Hungarians, and they lived with us in Texas for a while, so we uh, we learned how to say Budapest.
what a great adventure.
Yeah.
Wow. So, if folks wanted to contact you or just connect with you, what would be the easiest way for them to do that?
Probably just my Instagram account would be the easiest. Edge of Inside, edge
Okay.
underscore of underscore inside on
Okay.
Instagram. That's probably the easiest, and then we
Yeah.
can work from there. I do Instagram video calls with some of my Instagram friends, and those are really nice too. Instagram just makes it so easy to connect, I
It
think.
does. Okay, well,
Yeah,
I will leave that in the show notes. Michelle,
sure.
it has been a pleasure to connect with you again and to have this conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, I loved it, Megan. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. Beyond the Shadow of Doubt podcast is a proud member of the Dialogue Podcast Network, which is part of the Dialogue Journal found at dialoguejournal.com. Founder Eugene England was a Mormon writer, teacher, and scholar who wrote, "My faith encourages my curiosity and awe. It thrusts me out into relationship with all creation and encourages me to enter into dialogue. My hope is that this podcast is an extension of that vision." Hopeful Spaces is a Dallas Hope Charities component of Hopeful Discussions, sponsored by Mercedes-Benz Financial Services USA. It's a free monthly parent, ally, or caregiver support group facilitated by Megan Skidmore Coaching. Email chc@dallashopecharities.org for more info. Visit meganskidmorecoaching.com to find this podcast and additional free resources, including the link for a complimentary coaching session. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram for more, or to send me a DM. Help the podcast grow. Please follow, review, and share with a friend.